After our shopping trip, I grew more close to Mrs. Sharma. Now both of us would often just spend time chatting and gossiping to each other, having a girl time. Many weeks passed and my training was going on. Now I was capable enough to clean and maintain the house in pristine condition. I was also an expert in all household works, and became very good at wearing saris. I had gotten tips on how to maintain my hair, because of which it became even thicker, smooth and had a bright shine. I also knew many hairstyles. My voice training was done, which meant that I now spoke only in my female voice. I even started to think in my female voice. One thing that was a work in progress was my cooking, which as per Mrs. Sharma was a never-ending learning process. As more time passed, the questions that I wanted to ask Manish were still haunting me. I hadn't seen him ever since he was here with Dr. Raj. So I asked Mrs. Sharma when I would be seeing him again. She smiled and replied, "Very soon, dear." I don't know why, but was actually to know that I would be seeing Manish soon. Sure enough, Manish visited us the very next day. I had left my hair open and had little makeup on me. I was wearing a blue kurti and legging. Manish was utterly surprised to see me and his mouth was left hanging open for a while. He was checking me out from head to toe, over and over again. I was enjoying it very much. I cleared my throat to bring him back from his dreamland. He asked me to sit down on the sofa and seated himself opposite to me. And before he could start, I interrupted him. "Would you like to have a coffee?" in my new girl voice. He smiled and nodded his head like a little child wanting candy. Oh, I got up and started towards the kitchen, when he also got up and started to walk behind me. I don't know why I did it, but I intentionally swayed my hips more to look sexy. I could hear him say, "Off," and I couldn't resist myself from giggling. He kept on staring at me the whole time as I was preparing coffee for the both of us. We sat down at the dining table opposite to each other with our coffee. "You look amazingly beautiful. I haven't been able to take my eyes off you since the moment I saw you," he said, and I blushed like crazy listening to his compliment. "I know you have a lot of questions about what is going on. Why am I spending money on you? Why you are now pretty?" he said. I was dumbfounded. It was like he could read my mind. But I didn't react to it. I just nodded my head and waited for his answer. "You will get answers to all your questions, but not today. I am going to take you out tomorrow and I want you to be dressed in traditional attire," he said. Honestly, I was disappointed a little, but was excited about the idea of going out with him. So I simply smiled and nodded my head. He smiled back, and we both drank our coffee. Later he took me out to the garden and we had a little walk and we chatted about random stuff like our favorite colors, our favorite movie stars, etc. Now I was in my room, in my night clothes, laying on my bed, thinking about the time I spent with Manish. It felt weird the way I was felt with him and the way I was behaving around him. But I didn't know what the feeling was and decided not to resist it either. That night a lot of thoughts were going through my head. On one hand, I was excited to be going out with him, but at the same time, I was nervous as to what he would tell me. Next morning, I woke up early as usual, but today, I was relieved of all of my household duties and training sessions. I wanted to look beautiful. Today, I didn't know where Manish was taking me, but he had asked that I wear something traditional. So I selected a simple red lehenga with a cream-colored net dupatta. I also selected a necklace and matching jhumkas and laid them out on my dressing table and went to take my bath. I wore a matching red padded bra and panties, and just as I was about to wear my lehenga, I heard a knock on my door. I panicked, thinking that it was Manish. And he was already here. I quickly wrapped my towel around my chest and peeped through the door. But it was Mrs. Sharma. "Good morning, dear," she chirped cheerfully. I let out a sigh of relief and opened the door to let her in and dropped the towel on my bed. "Do you need any help, Preeti?" she asked. I declined it and said that I want to dress up on my own and started wearing the lehenga. Then I did my makeup. I applied kajal around my eyes to highlight them and also wore red lipstick to match my lehenga. Then I neatly combed my hair and left it loose. I wore the necklace and the jhumkas and looked myself in the mirror and looked back to Mrs. Sharma, who was sitting on my bed, for her input. She came to me and gave me a light hug and said, "You look beautiful, dear." I was happy to hear that. Just as we got down to the living room, the front door opened. He was wearing a cream-colored trouser and sky-blue button-down shirt with the folded sleeves. He looked very handsome and I couldn't take my eyes off him. I stood in front of him, looked at his face and raised my eyebrows, asking him how I looked. He smiled and whispered to me, "Gorgeous." He held out his hand for me to take and led me out of the front door. Just as I went out, I looked back and waved my hand at Mrs. Sharma. Outside, there was a white BMW 5 Series car waiting for us. Manish went and opened the front passenger side door for me. I blushed at his gesture and sat in, making sure that my lehenga was not in the doorframe. He then came and sat in the driver's seat and started the car and drove out of the farmhouse. While he was driving, he continuously kept glancing at me and my exposed waist. I really enjoyed the effect I had on him and the attention he gave me. We also spoke about random stuff, and I really enjoyed talking to him. After almost 2 hours of driving, Manish stopped at a temple. I asked him, was there any reason he brought me there? He replied that it was the deity his family has worshipped from many years and took me in. I was now very comfortable in public as a girl. No one could ever figure out that I was a guy. It was a pretty old temple, which had huge open spaces and small pond where devotees took a dip. We went into the temple and had darshan of the deity. We just sat in the premises of the temple and chatted for some more time before we left. On our way back, we had lunch at a very posh restaurant. After that, he dropped me home and left. It had been 2 days since Manish took me to the temple. I kept on thinking why I blushed when he looked at me, why I liked the way he spoke, why I liked his hair, his beard, his perfume, and couldn't understand how nice it felt spending time with him. Why was I getting feelings like this towards a man? Being a man myself, was I a man anymore? I certainly didn't look like a man anymore. Just as I was brought back to reality by the ring of the phone on the side table. I answered it assuming that it would be Mrs. Sharma, but was surprised to hear the voice of Manish. "Hey, beautiful, how are you?" he said cheerfully. Just as I heard that, my mind kept on repeating, "He called me beautiful, he called me beautiful." "Hello Preeti, you there?" He spoke again, bringing me back from fantasy world. Yeah, I am here. Hi, how are you?" I stammered. "I am wonderful. Listen up, I need you to be ready tomorrow morning. I am taking you somewhere and wear something trendy this time. Bye bye beautiful, see you tomorrow," he said and hanged up the phone. I was really excited listening to him and realizing that I would get to spend time with him again tomorrow. I was literally jumping in my room. "Wear something trendy," I repeated what he said and ran towards my wardrobe and started looking through my clothes to find something appropriate to wear. I picked out a couple of dresses and laid them out on my bed to decide which one I should wear. After a lot of deliberation, I decided upon a simple short-sleeved grey t-shirt paired with jeans short. It was simple, but would showcase my legs and curves very well. I hung it out on a cupboard handle and went about my day. Next day I woke up early and got dressed. I kept my makeup to a minimum to match the clothes I was wearing. Just as I had hoped, the shorts showed off my legs and the entire outfit highlighted my curves very well. I kept my hair open and made me down to the living room to wait for Manish. Just as I reached the lounge, Manish walked in. He was wearing a white t-shirt and jeans and had a leather jacket on top of it. He looked amazing. I couldn't take my eyes off him. Meanwhile, he himself was checking out my exposed legs, which left him slightly drooling. I just smiled to myself, looking at his face, and cleared my throat to bring him back to his senses. He was a bit embarrassed that I had caught him staring at my legs. "You look beautiful, Ems, pretty," he commented and gave me a wink. "Likewise, Mr. Manish," I said and returned his wink. "You will need to grab your jacket," he told me, and I ran up to my room and did as he asked and wore a leather jacket for myself. We came out of the house, and I was wondering where his car was. Just then he climbed onto his sports bike and handed me an open-faced helmet. I couldn't control my excitement, squealed out of happiness, realizing that we would be going out on a bike, which made him laugh. I grabbed the helmet and wore it along with my aviators and hopped onto the pillion seat. The seat was pretty high, since it was a sports bike and I had nothing to hold onto other than Manish. So I placed my hands on his shoulders. He wore his helmet and started the bike. He was riding pretty slow while we were in the city, and my legs got a lot of attention from other guys. As soon as we reached the highway, Manish opened the throttle of the bike and started zooming past cars and other vehicles. I had never sat on a bike that went so fast. I was struggling to keep myself on the bike and was now scared that I would fall off. Just then Manish jerked the bike, and out of fear, I hugged him from behind and looked up to see Manish giving me a thumbs up and drove faster. That's when I realized that he did it on purpose, so that I would hug him. I didn't mind since it felt so good to hug him, and I could feel his chiseled abs and chest through his t-shirt. And I was getting turned on. I was also really impressed on how well Manish drove the bike and without any hesitation overtook one vehicle after another and not reducing his speed even once. After a while, we stopped at a small cafe on the highway for breakfast and our chatting started. It was actually weird that both of us were so comfortable with each other and spoke to each other so freely. We finished our breakfast and continued on the ride. I realized that he was taking me to a hilltop near the city. It was a beautiful location, with an amazing view from the top, and was a very famous spot for couples. We reached the end of the road and parked our bike and started to trek to the top. It was a beautiful view at the top, which was amazing. I sat down on one of the cliffs looking out into the nature. When Manish started clicking pictures of me, I also went along and posed for him. After taking a few pictures, he came down and sat next to me and we chatted for a while. Then out of nowhere, he took out a small box from his jacket's pocket and held it in front of me. It was a jewelry box. I was confused and looked at him. He then opened the box. It contained a ring. Inside it, it was a platinum band with a few stones studded at the top in the shape of a small flower. It looked beautiful. I was shocked to see it. And stood up. He went down onto one knee and held the box up to me. "Will you marry me, Preeti? Will you please share my life with me?" he asked. I couldn't believe what was going on. I had tears in my eyes. But I knew clearly what I had to say, and I said it. I said, yes. He was relieved to hear my reply. The joy and relief was clearly visible in his eyes. He stood up and slid the ring onto the ring finger of my left hand. And tears started to flow down my cheeks. As he embraced me in his strong arms, I hugged him back with all the strength I had. I was overwhelmed. Never in my life I had thought that I would be proposed by a man and I would accept it. We stared at each other. I could see the love he had for me clearly in his eyes. I felt the same towards him and we kissed. A deep, long and loving kiss. And all the thoughts of confusion and fear faded away in that beautiful moment.